Welcome to Talking Giants, presented by SeatGeek. My name is Justin Pennick. My co-host Bobby Skinner is on vacation in Spain. Lucky him, but he is going to be joining me when we sit down with Dan Schneier of the Big Blue Banter podcast. Also does some awesome stuff for CBS Sports as well. It's a yearly tradition. We always have Dan Schneier on right after the draft. He was really excited with the Deonte Banks pick. We basically talk about those 3 top 100 picks, and then we also project where this Giants offense is going to be, where the Giants defense is going to be, talk about some position groups and specific things like that. So obviously, if you're a fan of the nitty-gritty football talk, especially Dan's a film guy, Bobby's a film guy, you're really going to enjoy that convo. It's always a good one. Yesterday was the first day of OTAs. The Giants vets and the rookies, they're practicing and they're meeting up together for the first time. So we'll have a formal OTA kind of recap, hopefully with an interview on Friday, possibly with somebody that we haven't interviewed before on Talking Giants too. Maybe a little bit of a beat reporter, a little bit of a tease. Don't want to promise anything, but we'll be given an OTA recap on Friday. Some of the things that I'm looking out for who's wearing the green dot. Is it going to be Bobby Okereke? Is it going to be Xavier McKinney? John Michael Schmitz? We've talked about the dead snap versus the regular snap. What is he doing with Daniel Jones? What's most comfortable for Daniel Jones? And then also kind of just in general, Richie James was a player last year that started to stick out a little bit last year. He started to emerge a little bit. What are some emerging names? What are some guys that are maybe getting run with like the second or first team that you usually wouldn't think that would be getting run during this time of year? And as we know, Richie James was an unknown name this time last year, but he became a big name for the Giants throughout the regular season last year. So those are 3 things that I'm keeping my eye out for. We'll talk about it on Friday with kind of like a little bit of an OTA recap. And before we throw it to Dan Schneier, we got to talk about SeatGeek, because today's episode, they are sponsored by SeatGeek. And, SeatGeek's also just a presenting sponsor of the show. That's kind of cool, kind of awesome. Thanks to SeatGeek for being them and doing what they do, because they are a bunch of seats that provide geeks. That's right. Said that right, didn't say it wrong. If you don't know what SeatGeek is, they're a ticketing app that makes buying tickets super simple. No, they do not sell geeks. With over 28 million downloads, SeatGeek, they are the number one and only one rated ticketing app that exists in my life. There are more than 70,000 events. That's a lot of events. Maybe you can go to a few every day, but you can't go to all of them. 70,000 events every single day on SeatGeek, including sports, concerts, festivals, and so much more. They always want to make sure that you're getting a good deal. So click on the green dot. Click on things that are green. Don't click on things that are red unless you are willingly want to spend more money, because red means a bad deal. Every ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee, and SeatGeek is the only site that lets you return your tickets ahead of time with swaps. That's fantastic. We've got the hookup. Use code GIANTS for $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek. That's $20 off your first purchase with promo code GIANTS. Click the link in the description to download the app. And here is Dan Schneier.
All right, we now welcome on to the program our good friend Dan Schneier, Big Blue Banter. I think this is every year we've done the show, we've had you on post-draft. Dan, how are you doing, my man?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be here, but I'm also happy that I just got to spend 2 weeks off from work. Well, a week and a half. I worked through one of the weeks, but a full week off from work out west. Saw my boy Nick out there in Arizona. Then I went out to the Grand Canyon and a little bit of time in Las Vegas. So good time. Ooh. I'm happy to be back though and talking some Giants football again.
Seems, got some nice time away. Grand Canyon is definitely one of those things I want to hit one day. Did you hike through it or just kind of went to it?
We won't spend too much time on this, but did I hike through it? We me and my entire family hiked through it. My brother, my dad, and mom, who are in their 60s, we did a hike all the way down into the ridge, and it was intense. I don't want to spend too much time talking about this, but let's just say my dad barely made it back up and told me that as he was going through each switchback on the way back up the mountain, he was like, it was like going through each of the 7 rings of hell for him. So it was quite a day.
Well, sounds very enjoyable, especially for your dad.
Yeah.
Everyone knows we'll plug all that stuff at the end. We're gonna jump right into it. And this is a great way to start this off with some good vibes. What pick in the draft just gave you the most initial excitement? And I feel like there's I think there's like 4 like possible answers for this, all the way up into like Eric Gray. Like, which pick gave you that most excitement, Dan?
Yeah, for me, it's always going to be somebody, if this is applicable, that landed on like a my guys list. And for me, when I watched through the film and studied all these players pre-draft, one of my guys was Deonte Banks. So the ability to get him in round 1, I looked at this draft beforehand, and I just thought in my mind that both Banks and Porter, who I have learned since the Giants weren't really interested in, don't really think maybe fits what they want to do defensively from a schematic standpoint. Those were the guys I was like, if either of those two are there, I'm just going to be very happy with how round 1 went. But Porter didn't actually make the my guys list. I was a little lower on him, but Banks is just a player who I feel like brings a level of athleticism to that cornerback position that they have not previously had. You can probably make the argument that Adoree Jackson is as athletic in some ways, but he's an older prospect with an injury history. Deonte Banks is coming in fresh, and I know he's had some injuries, so I don't mean he's had no injuries, but he's coming in fresh. He's got everything you want from, in my opinion, just the athleticism standpoint, the explosiveness. But then you watch him and you're like, and I saw you did a great breakdown on, by the way, Bobby, maybe a month ago or a few weeks ago now, but you can see that there's going to be like a learning curve for him. And that goes for that. Like, people are expecting Sauce Gardner. Don't expect Sauce Gardner ever again.
Only
really.
Sauce Gardner is Sauce Gardner.
Yeah, like, and Surtain did it to some extent too, but that was kind of system based, in my opinion, playing in Fangio's scheme. But like, when you're picking outside of the top 5, don't expect that kind of production. So he may get picked on year 1, and I'm not going to, there may be people who listen to this podcast and come back at me, Bobby and Justin, after year 1 and be like, how were you so excited about this pick? He was like such a bust. He was picked on, he was thrown at, he had bad games. But it's like, it's not about year 1 for these corners. It's about year 2, 3, and really 3 and 4. And can they evolve into that player that you then give the second contract to? And I have a lot of excitement about Banks' upside to be a corner 1 for the Giants.
Yeah, and we said, kind of specifically talking about growth, is end of year 1. Like, what is the trajectory at the end of year 1? Because again, I do think, and that's also like we have to adjust as Giants fans. Like, we're not picking top 10.
Mm-hmm.
We're picking, in this case, moved up 1 spot, but picking 24th. So you're not, you are going to get some guys that might struggle right away, especially at the cornerback position, which is one of the hardest transitions from college and NFL. And we would assume we're not putting him in, Pete Carroll's cover 3 defense, which is really corner friendly. Like, they're probably going to put him in some man coverage and stuff and put some responsibility on his plate. Say, what is like the area of improvement that like you've identified with Banks that you think like you want to see the most growth in?
I think he just, to me, he gets a little grabby. Well, there's the main area is I don't love him at the catch point. I think there's times that he just doesn't get his head around. I don't think he's ever going to really be that type of corner that's making 6 interceptions a year and jumping past like that style of cornerback. But I don't really care too much about that style of cornerback. Some of the best corners in the league don't have a lot of like high interception totals. Don't make a lot of plays on the ball. Yeah, Adoree's one of those guys. I feel like Marlon Humphrey's one of those guys. Jerry Alexander, I know he's at up and downs, but he's kind of one of those guys. So like, what maybe getting a little better at the catch point, but I think the other thing is, and you brought this up, and I think you could see it whenever you watch him, is he did tend to get a little bit grabby, and it's just such a difference between playing at the college level and the NFL level. Me and Nick and I talked about this a bunch during April. It's like you watch how they officiate corners at college versus the NFL, and it's just such a different. It feels to me, at least, like it's officiated so differently, the position. So I think there are going to be times, if he plays the way he showed already at Maryland, that he's going to get flagged for holding. And so basically those are the 2 areas where I'm really looking at most improvement. But the good news is I feel very confident with this specific position group, as far as the position coach goes, that the Giants can make a big jump there, or can, take a player and he can make a big jump under the coaching staff.
Yeah, Jerome Henderson has certainly done it before with guys with a lot less talent than first round guys, and especially the athlete too in Deonte Banks. Now, something that you said a couple of minutes ago is that either you heard or you think that Joey Porter Jr. isn't necessarily the best scheme fit for maybe what Wink Martindale, and let's include Joe Schoen in this too. Joe Schoen's the GM. He's scouting these guys to begin with. So I ultimately think I've rested. I think your answer is going to be something along the lines of athleticism, and this GM and this offense and defense, they like athletes. They like guys that are fast. And I know that's something you've talked about as the years have gone on too. But it's interesting to me because I still think in my brain, because of how long Joey Porter Jr. is, I still think like in my brain, you can make an argument that Joey Porter Jr. may be a better scheme fit than Deonte Banks. It's an argument. So what did you hear? What's necessarily making you think and say that Joey Porter Jr. isn't a fit maybe for this Wink Martindale / Joe Schoen team?
It's nothing I heard, Justin. It's just a matter of like, if I felt like they had those 2 pretty highly rated around the same line. I just don't see why they would ever trade up from 25 to 24. In their mind, they could just sit at 25 and get that player. I feel like it would have been similar in round 3 if they didn't have Jalin Hyatt above some of the other receivers who were taken around that range or after him, or where the Giants were originally selecting, I should say, at 89. So it's mostly based on that, but I think you nailed it with the first part. Like, the speed is the big factor here. If what Bobby said comes true, which I think it will, which is like, this is not going to be the most corner friendly scheme for a rookie, and Banks is going to be on an island a lot. You need to have that recoverability. You need to be, in my opinion, like a sub 4.4 type athlete. I always say this to Nick on the show. I hate the 40-yard dash. I think it's the stupidest thing for every position but corner. And not necessarily as much receiver. I really think you can dictate more at that position. You can use your head, your legs to kind of set defenders up. But when you're in a backpedal, when your job as corner is what it is, you need to have that ability. You need to have that raw speed to recover. So it's probably the only position where I actually do care about that. And I didn't care about that with DeAndre Baker. And I thought that was being overblown. And I know there were other issues with Baker from a mental standpoint. Obviously, he didn't really do a good job picking up Betcher's scheme in year 1. But at the same time, I felt like that was also an issue for him at the NFL level, just raw speed and the ability to recover.
Yeah, and the ability to recover, like with the change of direction stuff, obviously is where I think if you're comparing Banks and Porter, like that's where Banks has like that clear, that is clearly ahead of Porter in that. While we're talking about fast guys, Hyatt, it's kind of crazy. You know, I've repeated this line. People were getting annoyed by it, but the Giants got 3 players who are mocked to them at 25 with the first 3 picks. Now, I think the fact that Jalin Hyatt was mocked there is wild. But the reason he is that just raw, unfiltered speed. So I think most of us are like, hey, at 73, I'm thrilled. You know, at 25, I would have been disappointed. What are kind of your thoughts on Hyatt and kind of similar to Banks, maybe like some areas where you want to see him improve?
Yeah, for me with Hyatt, it's interesting. I feel like they're making a bet on, once again, their own coaching staff and their own ability. And some people might be like, oh, that's coaching hubris, but like, sure, you can make that case, but this coaching staff has done a really good job, at least through 1 year, of, acting on what they're saying they're going to do. They've done it. Like, think of some of the players they've brought up to speed really fast, from Nick McLeod to Isaiah Hodgins. So from that standpoint, I got to have my confidence in this current staff as well. I won't have that in every staff, but this staff. And so they're basically telling us, like, look, we understand that he didn't do a lot on tape at Tennessee, but don't worry about that. That's not what he was asked to do. And we have a different plan for him, and we think he can get up to speed with that. But if you're asking for just like things that I'm looking for from Jalin Hyatt that I maybe didn't see when I watched him at Tennessee, the biggest one for me by far away is his catch ability, because that was the biggest concern for me when I was evaluating him. Nick and I did a podcast on him. Neither of us wanted him in round 1. We also preferred Cedric Tillman, though I said I would prefer Hyatt for this system, because I don't want to get too into this, but I'm just kind of done for now with the Tillman types for Daniel Jones until I see it work. I'd rather have these separation type receivers. So when it comes to Hyatt and the fit, I was like, we were talking about it, and we're just like, for a receiver who's as small as he is and wins with speed the way he does, I would like to see a little bit more post catch. Like, you watch Zay Flowers, and if you watch Flowers and you watch Hyatt, you'll see someone who does a much better job, in my opinion, in the open field. And I felt the same way with Tyler Scott, who went a bunch later. And I know he's a really raw prospect, so he dropped in the class and he's smaller, but they almost look like running backs to me when they're in the open field, Flowers and Scott. And I felt like with Hyatt, it was just, he's running a deep over, or he's running the vertical route tree. And once he gets the ball in one of those deep overs, he just plants and tries to get vertical immediately. And so I kind of want to see a little bit more creativity in the open field. And that I think could lead to big plays for him based on his speed.
Justin, are you muted or not?
Am I now?
All that high tech at John Boy, and we can't even get you.
Got this stupid disco room and a
Dan,
microphone you got to hold in your hand.
It's a whole other rant and story for another day. But I almost feel like when you talk about Hyatt in that way, it almost reminds me of Slayton throughout his first 3 years in the NFL, where, I mean, you look at the advanced numbers, yards after the catch, over expectation, and Slayton was just really bad in those categories. And then he was fine this year. I don't think he was an advantage, but I think he just benefited from being schemed wide open and, him having that speed and, being beneficial after the catch. But I do agree with you about, that is valuable. That's a valuable asset that you need in the NFL for sure. Bobby, can I move to Waller, and can we just stick with speed? Like, this is just what we're talking about this podcast so far, is speed.
Well, that's my question right there about the offense. Like, and I view this like, this is why, like, I'm actually excited we get Dallas week 1, because I think to make the playoffs, you got to split with Dallas.
Definitely.
How do you expect this offense to look differently schematically? Like, I think there's a lot of coaches say we scheme to our players, not our scheme. And it's a bunch of bullshit. Like, you have your scheme, you run it. But we've seen with this coaching staff that they essentially changed 3 times throughout last season, where they started where they were running more of what they were doing in Buffalo, long developing stuff, and it didn't work outside. And the running game worked, and then they got into more of that under center, 2 tight end play action, and we're very run heavy. And then that started kind of getting figured out. They were play actioning on 2nd and 12, and then they changed to some more drop back quick game. But now they added Hyatt, they added Darren Waller, they added Paris Campbell, where they're a much faster team than they were last year. Where last year they were just a slow team outside of Darius Slayton. What are some things that you are looking for to be different schematically on offense to start the season?
Yeah, I want to see them use more of the 3x1 sets with Darren Waller as the one, because that's something we saw a little bit with Kafka in Kansas City when he was working with Andy Reid, with Kelsey. And even at times I was looking back, and Stable did a little bit of that with Dawson Knox as well. And I just think that gives you a nice advantage to have Darren Waller there isolated as kind of basically your X receiver, the only one on this, in my opinion, the only one on this team besides Isaiah Hodgins. And even with Hodgins, I feel like there's probably a little bit more upside with Waller in that role, I guess, than Hodgins. And when you do that, you can come out with 12 personnel, and it's not really 12 personnel. Like, you'll have Daniel Bellinger on the field, but is it really 12 personnel when Darren Waller is your X receiver? And I feel like that's going to give them a little bit of an edge. But I do ultimately want to see a lot more 11 personnel. I'm always a big 11 personnel guy. I've been that way for a while. 12 personnel is fun. It worked for the Giants, like you said, some of those defenders game, right? And it's like, how are the Bears falling for the same thing over and over and over again? It's just a super undisciplined defense. But on the flip side, if you want to talk about where the Giants evolved to, like you said, in that third phase, you look at the Vikings game and the Packers game where they had their most success, and those were against 2 defensive coordinators that really just were struggling hard last year. I mean, those defenses were not on the same page, and it led to a ton of crazy breakdowns in that game that made no real sense. And I don't want to take away credit for what the Giants did, but I think they have to evolve the passing game a little bit from that. So what I'd like to see a little bit more of is Slayton and Hyatt both on the field at the same time, opposite sides of the field. Because one thing that I noticed throughout watching tape last year, and I brought this up to Nick a bunch, was besides Darius Slayton, there was literally no respect paid for any of the wide receivers as far as on the line of scrimmage goes. Like, when Slayton started to get going a little bit at the end of the year, you would see those corners start to line up 10 yards off the ball, but outside of him, that just wasn't the case. So if you get both on the field eventually, and we'll see how fast, I should say, Hyatt gets up to speed, no pun intended. But if you get both on the field, you might see a little bit more off coverage. You might see a little bit of what we've been hoping for like years, I feel like, watching this team, which is just safeties pay some respect to like the potential for the Giants to throw over the top, and that will open up space in the middle of the field for Darren Waller.
Any concern in the back of your brain, now this is the second year of Mike Kafka, Brian Dable. There's an entire year on tape and on film of some of their tendencies and what they do. Now, I'm really glad that they added the speed element this offseason, and in a way, it's good that they literally cannot get worse in the explosive play department, right? So it's not that they showed way too much on tape, right? But is there any kind of concern of the league figuring you out? Because, you see a lot of times where coaches kind of come onto the scene, schemes come onto the scene, the league kind of figures you out, and maybe you come back down to earth a little bit. Any concern of that?
That's a great question, Justin. I mean, look, I know not every Giants fan is going to want to hear it, but I tweeted about this a couple weeks ago. I'm not as concerned about the Giants quote unquote tough schedule as I am about what you just said, Justin. That's my number one concern for the entire 2023 season. And then look, some people call me a hater for that. I don't really care. That's something real. Like, you brought it up when coaches have, I've heard from some people, I don't know, I don't think this is like a true number or anything. And maybe you've heard about this, Bobby and Justin, but like 8 games, supposedly it's 8 games on film of a system of a quarterback. And that's when coordinators have enough work, have enough to adjust around. But I just look at like the example we have, the Eagles, right? The Eagles played the Giants 3 times last year. When we got to that third game, man, that was really, really bad on tape for what the Eagles defense did to the Giants offense. Like, there were 0 answers the Giants offense had. You want to run this stuff like the Giants ran against Minnesota, where they get Barkley to the perimeter and he has that long touchdown run? No shot, because every single time the defensive backs are crashing down. They were sitting on every single quick passing game route. They were paying 0 respect to the deep middle, 0 respect to either the deep, obviously the deep outside the numbers. There's no respect paid in general right now, at least last year. So there is definitely some concern that defenses will continue to play the Giants that way. But the good news is, like, I thought about that a little bit more, even just saying it right now. It's like, not every defense is going to have the talent the Eagles had. So you would hope that, like, even if teams do start to figure out what the Giants did schematically, what Bobby said earlier, which is the Giants already proved, at least this step, they can adjust. They did 3 different style of offenses last year. I mean, just think about the run game. It felt like almost every week they were introducing new things to their run game, even little wrinkles to the passing game. Like toward the end of the year, we would see Bellinger lined up as like an H-back and release into a route. So I have enough faith in the coaching staff to overcome it. But I do think there will be matchups where it's like, Eagles, for example, they have a lot of film on what Kafka and Dable want to do, and they have a lot of talent on that defense, and they're going to be probably playing the Giants the exact same way they played in the playoff game. I don't see any reason for them not to. And those are the games where I'm most concerned, like, what can the Giants do to beat that?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what become their staples. You know, like mesh was a big staple for them on third down. And then they kind of changed their stick concept last year where Saquon was the flat in that. And that's how James Bradbury had that interception in the playoff game. He knew exactly what they were running, baited it to like give Jones one look, and then goes and undercuts the curl route or the stick route from Darius Slate. And obviously we know Bradbury is a very cerebral player. So you give him any tendency, he's the type of guy to take advantage of it, but still, like the other coaches. So it'll be interesting to see what their staples are, and especially on third down. All curls was a big one when they were converting 3rd and 15s.
Which is ironic, by the way, right? Because it's what we killed the Giants for under Jason Garrett. It like worked a little bit under these guys.
That's the frustrating thing, is like all curls can work as long as like that's not the only thing you're putting on tape.
Yeah.
Like it can be a great 3rd and long play if it's not what your 1st and 10 and 2nd and 5 play is too. So it'll be interesting to see what their staples become, because they're obviously going to introduce and bring some of those Buffalo concepts that are more long developing and the stuff that Kansas City likes to do. Waller really is the huge like X factor, not the X factor, like the main factor. It's like there's so many different things you can do with him in the receiving game, but also you kind of have to scheme around him not being a great blocker, which you talked about 12 personnel. Let's just pretend everybody stays healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Who gets a higher snap share, wide receiver 4 or Daniel Bellinger?
I would say wide receiver 4.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm worried about where Bellinger's place is on this team for this year, which sucks because I think he's a great prospect and a great player.
H-back.
H-back is cool. Like, but that if they want to do that, like that, we saw a little, like I said, we saw a little bit of that last year, but I just feel like any offense at its best has 3 receivers on the field at once. And then it's like, can you consider Darren Waller a receiver? Maybe. But if they can get some of these guys up to speed, especially Jalin Hyatt, it seems to me like their best bet is to have the three of that group on the field. I don't know which ones that will be. It'll probably mix and match based on the defensive looks, obviously, but I just don't think you live in 12 personnel. Like, I don't think the best offenses really ever live in 12 personnel.
It's going to be really interesting. I mean, injuries are going to answer a lot of questions. Like, right? It just happens. But we recorded our 53-man roster episode, and it's like there's kind of a lot of bodies in this wide receiver room right now. And it's like, where does Sterling Shepard even, like, what is the plan for Sterling Shepard? Where we put him on, which, like, we're just in this world of everyone healthy, it's like kind of got to cut Shepard because he adds no special team value. And like, what's the plan? What's the plan for this guy above of these other 5 locks, depending on where Wandale is health wise? So we talked a lot about the offense. I want to go back to
defense. Yeah.
Well, I want to go back to the draft.
Ooh.
Let's talk about John Michael Schmitz. I mean, that's the happiest I've been with a pick in a long time, to get a guy who, I mean, I thought he was the best center in the draft. Had some, I think, some of the best offensive line film in the whole draft outside of maybe Skoronski, but just doesn't have like the Broderick Jones, Paris Johnson athletic profiles and play the tackle position. How big was that? Like, what was your reaction to that, getting a guy who's like maybe the only plug-and-play center in the draft?
Yeah, I was definitely Tippmann over Schmitz guy, though I did have Schmitz as my center 1. I thought he was the best center in the class. I just personally would like to bet on the traits of Tippmann over a player like Schmitz when it comes to center. For center and linebacker, for me, I am more, and this is probably to a fault, but I am more of like a traits projection based guy because I just feel like a lot of these centers, like over the years, I always mention the name to Nick on the podcast, which he thinks is so funny, but like Matt Hennessy was a guy who was like hyped up super to Giants fans. I was like, this dude is never going to be more than any average kind. Like he can be an average center in the NFL, but what does that get you? Like the Giants have had average center play, in my opinion, the last 2 seasons. I thought Feliciano was pretty average and Gates, love him, but I thought he was pretty average. So to get that next level of center play, I was kind of looking for more of a trade-based prospect. But when it comes to John Michael Schmitz, like you said, he had some of the best film in the class. He, at the Big Ten level, for what he did. Now, who knows how it will translate? That's a question mark. But he did at least go against some of the, some nose tackles who were drafted, Mozzie Smith, Keanu Benton. But at the Big Ten level, he was a dominant player. Can he be that at the NFL level? I'm hoping so. But I still love the pick overall because of most importantly for me, it's showing that you are invested in protecting what I think is the most important area for Daniel Jones, the interior offensive line. Obviously, the Giants already have potentially 2 solutions on the outside, but for the type of offense they're going to run and for the type of quarterback I think Jones is going to be, he needs more of a sure thing under center, especially when it comes to what the Eagles and Cowboys did. That's what really made me feel like, and I hate to do needs-based drafting, but I feel like at that level, it's not a needs-based pick. I always said when it comes to JMS or Tittman, I didn't want them at all in round 1. I thought that would have been a terrible pick. But if you took them at like 50, between 50 and 60, that's what I said, I would have been good with it and I would have been happy with it. So it kind of got him in the range. It's not like the most thrilling pick for me. I like Deonte Banks pick a lot more. Obviously, I mentioned that earlier, but I'm happy with what they did there. And more importantly, I'm happy that they kind of combated what the division's doing.
I just want this for my mind. Like, I don't even know if the listeners care. Who did you mock to the Giants at 25? Did you do like a mock right before the draft?
We did a full 7-round mock draft. I had Banks because he fell in the mock. I did.
Oh, nice. Good job.
Yeah. I got lucky with that one. I think Nick actually had John Michael Schmitz in round 2. So I think we both nailed 1 and 2.
Good job, guys. Our problem is we do like more.
I know you do a bunch.
We do as like a not doing what we think will happen, what we want will happen.
Oh, okay.
I was very much a Cansey guy, despite some of the arm length and weight stuff with him. And I was just trying to speak that into existence. I knew someone was going to take him before 25, but I was trying to speak that into existence.
I was going to say I had heard before the draft from someone I trust that he had no chance of making it to the Giants from what they said, and they said the same about Bijan. So, and they were right about both of those guys. Did you have John Michael? Did either of you have? That was my question for either of you. Were either of you a big fan of JMS at 25, or were you happier in round 2?
No, but I also thought he wouldn't be there at 57. So like that was maybe one of my prayers for the draft was like, hopefully JMS could fall to 57. But yeah, no, I wouldn't have taken him in the first. I don't think he has the foot speed and he's 24 years old to be a first round center. I think to be a first round interior offensive lineman, you kind of got to be like last year's class where you got Zion Johnson, Kenyon Green, even though, I mean, it's also, I noticed last year, all rookie guards struggle. Like I didn't, maybe last year was an outlier, but I didn't realize how much rookie guards struggle when you look at like the numbers and stuff. And then Linderbaum, I wasn't as high on as everyone else, but at 25, I would have been cool with that too, which I think is exactly where he went to the Ravens.
Yeah.
So I don't think he had the foot speed and being 24 years old is somewhat of a knock to. I just thought there would have been better players there at 25. But at 57, I was thrilled. Let's talk about defense now. Safety.
Yeah.
They because they were used some draft capital. They weren't able to add an edge, and that's why they brought O'Shane Zimenez back. Weren't able to add a linebacker. Obviously, they got Okereke in free agency. But safety, they did add one guy with their last pick in Javarius Owens. But it seems like the 4 safeties they have outside of Xavier McKinney are very much different types of players. What do you see happening, with the safety spot next to Xavier McKinney?
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting situation that's going to come down to matchups, and it's going to come down to a bunch of different guys rotating in, depending on the down and distance. And I think Bobby McCain was probably brought into play as close to the Julian Love role as anyone on this roster can or will. But I don't think it's going to be the exact same role it was last year. Like Nick was a huge fan of Julian Love. I wasn't as big a believer in bringing him back, but biggest reason why he loved him so much was because of all the different hats he wore and how dependable he was for the Giants last year. And that, I don't think McCain will be that, but I don't think you need him to be that. The guy that I have my eye on, and I know a lot of Giants fans have like in some ways given up on him because he didn't play a lot down the stretch, but Dane Belton, the thing with Dane Belton is think of how different we all would have viewed his rookie season if those 3 near interceptions, and they were really close to being interceptions. All 3 of them were actually interceptions, and he came down with them. And then you look at the stat sheet, and he has 3 interceptions added to his total. We would have thought like, oh my God, this could be a 5th round steal. Like we just got a guy who's a ball hawk. And I feel like with Dane Belton, one thing I like that he brings to this defense that I don't think any of these other safeties maybe can bring to this defense right now, with the exception of Xavier McKinney, is that ability to kind of figure out where the quarterback wants to go with the ball, and oftentimes like bait him into throwing into a certain spot and then make the play on the ball, or try to be, have those ball skills to potentially make the play on the ball. And so I think Dane Belton's going to be a much bigger factor than people realize, or people think he's going to be right now. And that's kind of one of my favorite picks for the year. And I'm also just thinking of safety, Bobby and Justin. I'm thinking about like where Xavier McKinney is going to play in year 2 of this defense, because we saw toward the end of the year, and maybe it was matchup based, but he started to finally like do what I was hoping he would do more of, which is like match up with those tight ends. Because I just don't love having the Giants' other options over the slot, kind of like having McKinney their best. But now it's like with Love gone, are we going to see him play a little bit more of the type of role he played in the last system, with Patrick Graham? Is he going to play a little more single high? Is he going to play the deep half more? And so I'm very curious to see how they use McKinney, but I think depending on where they use McKinney is gonna kind of dictate which of those other safeties are going to be on the field.
Yeah, the safety position outside McKinney, there's not a ton of confidence in there. Belton is a player I just have a hard time getting a read on, and what his role is. It's kind of like a fun, bad position to me, because McKinney is a guy you can do different things week to week with him, where, there's weeks last year where they had him, playing the box only and covering Christian McCaffrey in man coverage. And then there was weeks where they had him as a single high safety. And then they did some, split safety stuff towards the end of the year so you can move him around. And then the other guy is, like you said, like it truly could be a week by week, like different player in that spot, depending on what McKinney's trying to do, even though someone's going to solidify themselves as the starter, hopefully.
Do you think it's real life where like Wink Martindale will look at a specific team and look at, even Jerome Henderson too, they'll approach a specific game plan in the secondary being like, we want Xavier McKinney to do this. So then the rest of our secondary and especially the rest of our safety room is going to do this. We want Xavier McKinney in the box. We want him defending tight ends, or we want him covering a running back. So therefore, Bobby McCain, you're going to be that deep safety. You're going to be in coverage. Or we want McKinney deep, pin out, somebody else in the box. Javarius Owens in the box. Do you think that's real life? Because I really want, and I think the Giants need Xavier McKinney back, making plays that actually show up in a box score, whether it's pass deflections, interceptions. The Giants defense didn't get any interceptions last year. So is that kind of scenario that I painted, is that real life, or is that kind of just like fan fiction?
Yeah, I don't think it's fan fiction. I think that's how they're going to do this. Like they have to base it on the matchups. But as far as like McKinney getting back in the box score, like that was the role he had in Patrick Graham's defense made it so. Yeah, it was perfect to an extent, but like yes and no for me, because like I also don't know if there's anyone on this defense that can do anything close to what he can do from a matchup standpoint over those big slots, like what he did with Hawkinson. And like, so it's like it's perfect, but they kind of need 2 McKinneys. They need somebody who can play the deep half and make plays, but also match up against these tight ends, because I don't want Darnay Holmes doing that. Like Bobby McCain, I think will play a lot, because I think he can also kind of play over like the nickel role over the slot, but it's like I don't really even think he's that good in that role either. So it's a tough spot with McKinney, because a lot of fans are like, was he even good last year? Like no box score stats. But like when you play all those roles in the defense and you're in the box, like you're not going to, like you said, you're not going to have as many box score stats, but it doesn't mean you're not playing. It doesn't mean you're having as much of an impact in the game. But to be fair, like you guys watch the tape, you guys would probably agree. Like McKinney was a better player in 2022 or 2021 than he was in 2022. And I think a lot of that probably was a mental thing coming back from that injury and just one. And then before that, just trying to get accustomed to the different roles he's playing in the defense.
Wearing the green dot too.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
I'm excited to see if they maybe give that to Okereke. Also, like in that beginning of the season, they were shading him a lot towards Fabian Moreau, and kind of where the year before they had 2 guys on the outside they trusted in Bradbury and Adore, and they used him in week 2 versus the Panthers, played almost exclusively down low covering Christian McCaffrey. But that was cool to see. Now Dallas Goedert, South Dakota, punched him in the face. Dallas Goedert bought him in that playoff game, but outside that, I thought McKinney played pretty damn well last year, like you said, despite the box scores. What schematically on film did you see for the reason the Giants got no interceptions?
That's a good question. It could be like I'd have to think about that a little bit more. Thinking about like I'm just thinking right now about Baltimore's defenses under Wink Martindale and if they were turnover heavy. My guess is they weren't. I feel like they weren't just from memory. Even the year, like remember the year they had all those dudes healthy, all three of those corners healthy for that like 6-8 game stretch, and they got injured. But like during that stretch, they were like the best defense. No one could move the ball against them at all. There was like no solution for beating them. But I feel like even during that stretch, and someone correct me if I'm wrong listening, but I don't think they had a lot of turnovers. I think it was more so just they didn't give up points and they didn't give up first downs.
I think they're more of a forced fumble defense. That's
Yeah.
my guess.
Sure, I didn't mean turnovers. I meant interceptions for sure.
Yeah,
'Cause
that's
the
all.
Giants definitely can get forced fumbles with what
Yeah.
they've got on the defensive line. But I don't really feel like the Giants are going to have much. Like, I don't know if it was a schematic thing. Maybe it's that they were playing a lot of man coverage. I'm not sure. I don't know if it was a schematic thing or more so just like a personnel thing, right? Like we knew none of those linebackers were making any plays on the ball at any time in the passing game. So you just rule out interceptions there, right? Then the corners who were on the field, the Dory's supposed to have good ball skills. I feel like I love Adoree Jackson as a cover corner, by the way, and I love him in run support. But
Yeah.
as far as like this big interception guy, I've never really seen him as that either. And that's going to be the same thing as I mentioned earlier with Banks. Like I love Banks. He was my guy, but I don't think he's ever going to be a high interception corner. I don't think that's the biggest, like that was the only knock I had on his game besides the grabbiness. Like it was just, does he get his head around? Does he make plays on the ball? So how do you do it? Maybe it's just what Justin said. You got to put Xavier McKinney more in the deep path and let him make the plays on the ball. But the other thing for me, as I mentioned before, I really think if you get Belton on the field more, that could lead to more interceptions because I think he's got a really good nose for the football.
Yeah, I'm looking at those numbers now. The Ravens were fifth lowest in 2020 for interceptions. What were they?
Also, one thing, Bobby, like just to get back on your question, it's like the way the Giants system is, like Wink Martindale's, they don't do a lot of like 2 high safeties before the snap with the safety buzzing down. Like that's something I think Dane Belton could do a really good job of, but that's not really a lot of what they do, or at least not of what I saw last year. So it's like, I feel like there were fewer opportunities for someone to make a play on the ball and make an interception.
Also, I think a lot of times teams, when they know that they're going to be facing pressure, a team that's going to try and create pressure, so they're going to get the ball, try and get the ball out quick, and that's why. Hey, they had lowest interceptions, but they were the highest in the NFL for completion percentage allowed. Or they were best in the NFL, where they had one of the lowest completion percentages allowed too, where teams are trying to get the ball out quick. And obviously that helps, that helped Fabian Moreau survive. And some other guys. So it's going to be interesting to see what type of different things happen. Defensively, I don't think you do lose Julian Love. I think it's a downgrade. I'm with you where he was my unpopular let walk guy. But they have this weird now after Okereke inside linebacker too. It's still scary. Hopefully the additions of Ashawn Robinson and Nunez Roches help with that. But and then if Aziz or Kayvon go down, you are starting someone at edge who gives you zero pass rush production. Like Jihad Ward gives you nothing as a pass rusher, and maybe the most insulting thing I've ever said about a player is O'Shane Zimenez is a pass rush specialist who doesn't rush the passer.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see. You got anything left? We're gonna save record prediction for the van at FanFest.
Okay, yeah, we got to save that because the last time I made that prediction, I got it right, and I did kind of got it right. I said 9-8, and they were 9-7-1. But I'm holding to fame for that because I was really appreciative when and I realized I learned at least recently it was you, by the way, Bobby. I didn't know that you were the one running the Twitter account for John Boyd for Talking Giants. So credit to you because it's pretty awesome. Wait, am I not supposed to say that on here? I don't know.
Oh yeah, you could say it.
Yeah, I don't know if we're gonna cut that out or whatever.
No, you can.
Nick told me that recently. I was like, oh, that's awesome. I didn't know that he was running. I thought you guys, all the fanciness of John Boy. I thought you guys maybe had a social media team running that account.
Yeah, look at me right now. All the fanciness of John Boy.
Look at that background. You're in a club.
I'm holding a USB microphone with this background and lights that are probably giving people a seizure behind me. So yeah, all the fanciness of John Boy.
Maybe too much, but I loved how that the Talking Giants account tweeted out that I had that record prediction midway through the season when it was like everyone else was like 4-12, 4-13. So we'll get to that there, but I'm gonna save it for there. I want to get a better feel. But I guess the one thing I want to talk about more before we get going would be, how do you guys feel about right now the run defense as it stands? Because you just mentioned something interesting, Bobby, when it comes to like if they have any injuries on the edge. But even if they don't have any injuries on the edge, I thought it was a two-prong like reason why the Giants run defense was so bad last year. It was the linebackers. Everyone's talking about the linebackers, but I just also felt like the way the Giants play the way they kind of line up their defenders with those 3 inside and the 2 on the outside, The two on the outside, I don't think even Thibodeau included, who was better at it. And I think he's even better while in pursuit, which is a different style run defense. I didn't think they did a great job of setting the edge unless Jihad Ward was on the field. Mm-hmm. So it's like that still remains a concern to me because the projected starters are going to be Thibodeau and Ojulari, assuming they can get through camp healthy, both of them. Do you feel like that could still be like the run defense could still be an issue despite everything they added on the interior and Okereke because they're still going to struggle at times to set the edge?
I don't think it's going to be great, but I also think that Wink Martindale, there's nothing that eats up a defensive coach more than getting your ass ran on consistently. So I do think there's just going to be more emphasis, and they couldn't take Dexter off the field. And when Leo was injured, it was really bad. I mean, you had Ryder Anderson out there who was just getting washed down. And then, like you said, they didn't have good edge setters where Kayvon has the ability to become a solid edge setter, but him and Aziz were both like guys who are going to win in the run by disengaging, not setting an edge. And then the linebacker play was the worst I've seen covering this. So I think Okereke will be a huge upgrade, but Okereke is also not like a superstar linebacker either. He's a really good upgrade, but he's he's a good linebacker in the NFL, not a great one. So inside linebacker 2 is going to be an issue. I mean, they got killed by every type of misdirection they got to where they would actually do halfway decent versus zone teams like the Minnesota Vikings because Dex was able to win up front, and it's just a lot less reading for the linebackers. Where I know teams can't change their whole run identity week to week, but I didn't know why teams like the Vikings or in zone run teams didn't be like, hey, well, we're going to become gap. We're going to pull guys this week because they are extremely vulnerable to this. Like it was really, really bad to watch. So yeah, it was. When McKinney went down, some of the other safeties weren't great filling in the run. It was just there were so many bad things that led to such like the worst run defense in the NFL yards per carry wise.
And that's where I was gonna go to the secondary, and I was gonna point to the secondary. So I think guys like Cordell Flott, guys like Aaron Robinson, Deonte Banks not being a total disaster year one. I think that's going to be the element that helps out the run game the most because you didn't add these interior defensive linemen and you didn't add Bobby Okereke to be like, okay, we're going to add these guys up front and in the front seven for the purpose of taking guys out of the box. You added these guys for the purpose of we want to get back to stacking the box and we want to get back to loading up the box like Wink Martindale wants to do. So naturally, I would think bodies in the box is an advantage for a run defense, but where it's not an advantage, it's not an advantage for your pass defense. That's why you need the guys in the back end like McKinney. You need a Dory Jackson to stay healthy. You need your CB2. You need your slot corner to all be healthy, kind of in sync with each other. So that's why I think those guys are so key. And the secondary is just as key as the guys up front doing a good job of stopping the run, but having the bodies down there like they want to, I think is key as well.
Yeah, I agree on that. And we'll have to see how they do it. It's going to be interesting. It's just something that remains a concern for me outside of like the general concerns. Like, can they set that edge? Because like you said, Bobby, I remember previewing that Vikings game, that second Vikings game with somebody who watched a lot of the film on the Vikings, Sean Syed. And he was like,
he's our guy.
Yeah, he was like, yeah, I wouldn't, because we brought up that exact same point. We're like, the Giants can stop zone. Like, why wouldn't the Vikings just run power? He's like, I feel like I've seen 2 or 3 plays total where they've pulled a guard at all this entire season. So it's like some teams just simply aren't even practicing it. So they can't, like, I doubt, in my mind at least, I doubt they can just go into a game and be like, let's run power and gap when we just like, let's pull this guy when there's been no reps and no kind of time. They haven't had a chance to get the timing down at all in the run game. So I think that works to the Giants' benefit because I honestly feel like it'll be the same exact thing, not exact thing, but I think the Giants will be better against zone teams again than they are against power and gap teams. Like you said, like one of the things I like about Okereke, I don't think he's like an all-pro linebacker either. I feel like there's just not many of those in general in the NFL. So it's like you can't expect that. But I do like how he is sideline to sideline. And it's funny because that was the trait I liked about Ogletree when they first brought him in, but he's a much better player than Ogletree. So like, don't think of that name when it comes to like winning sideline to sideline. But that's something I felt like was a major issue for Jalin Smith last year or whoever they put in there on the inside, in that main Mike linebacker position. So at the very least, I think that will help them with some of those misdirection runs. Like the worst film I thought I saw, and I'm sure just to bring this up because I think it was funny, like they could have ran for like 400 yards, but their combination of the back and the wide receivers just picked some of the dumbest holes I've seen. But the Jaguars game, like that was an eye-opening game from a schematic standpoint of what the Jaguars did in the run game. And if ETN and I think it was Zay Jones on one of them and one of the other dudes like didn't just pick some of the like worst holes I've ever seen, like literally like go straight. You have a touchdown. Nah, let's go to the outside here. The Giants could have given him like 300 yards that game. So hopefully Okereke will be able to help them in that regard.
Which is kind of crazy. Like, I did not forecast that at all for the Wink Martindale defense, despite the
Same.
So 2021, when Wink Martindale's last year with Baltimore, that defense was really bad. Worst pass defense in the NFL.
They were still the best run defense.
They were the best run defense in the NFL.
Yeah.
So I thought they would at least establish, and they did. Towards the end of the year, they kind of moved into some more light boxes and stuff. But the beginning of the season, they did stack the box, and they did well versus the Titans, who were a very good run because the Titans were just running zone. Also, I think putting Tay Crowder, and again, this is the state of the Giants linebacker room last year, where it's like, I am in no way saying Tay Crowder is good, but Tay Crowder going into the doghouse and then eventually being cut, like, I do think that downgraded the room over Jalen Smith, despite the fact that Tay Crowder stinks. You always have to put that disclaimer in there for people. So please, God, don't let because that's, as a football fan, that's the worst thing. Just getting run on.
I'm hoping they can sign someone before the start of the season to play just to compete on the inside, like similar to the signing they made, or even if it's week 1 with Jalen Smith, but just a better version of what Jalen Smith gave them. I'm not sold at all on Micah McFadden, unfortunately. Very rarely do I watch a player in his rookie season and have and think it might go down from there or level out and just be that's what it is. Unfortunately for me with McFadden, that was one of the few guys I watched, and I was just like, I just don't think he has the NFL. Like, the speed of this game, I think is just too fast for him to ever be like somebody you want on the field often.
Counterpoint: did you watch Dan Beavers in the first preseason game?
I did back in the day, but I don't think I remember that at all. But is that
the best time to ever get injured from a PR standpoint is after one preseason game.
Everyone's penciling him in as like this piece for next year. It's insane. This is a 6th round pick. Like, what are we doing here?
Coming off a torn ACL, and he's like the only old draft pick from the last class. And I actually thought Micah McFadden played better in that preseason game, but he just didn't have that big tackle for a loss on the screen.
I like him moving forward. I just like, if I don't trust you moving laterally, I don't know if I ever want you really on
wins
the
in
field.
a phone booth.
Yeah,
at linebacker. That's not what you want. You can't have wins in the phone booth at linebacker. Like, not today's NFL, at least I don't think. I feel like you need to get yourself in passing lanes better. But I think a lot of his issue was just aware. Like, you saw at the game he was benched. Like, I think I forgot what was the game he was benched in. Was it Houston or Detroit? Maybe it was one of the middle of the season. McFadden.
He came in the Seattle game. Actually, that was his best game when he started against Seattle. He got benched.
There was a game where he had like 4 plays in a row where it looked like he just didn't, like, the awareness was still an issue and he didn't get to the right spot, and then we didn't see him again that game. But
then he got benched for Jared Davis at the end of the year too.
And that was also eye-opening. Like, who brings in a guy off the street and starts him for the playoff game, like over your rookie linebacker?
He was a massive upgrade. We're like, whoa.
Like, this guy actually plays forward.
Temper the expectation on the word massive there, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right, Dan, where can everybody find your work?
Yeah, thanks a lot again for having me on. Love talking football with both of you guys. We'll definitely be meeting up in the preseason at some point. Hopefully, same thing as last year, where get to go into that van, get myself a nice piece of candy, and then make my winning prediction. And hopefully, I nail it again. I'm still very excited and proud about that. But
you didn't predict the tie. I
didn't predict a tie, so it really it's not perfect, but I predicted 9 wins at least. So we did something there. More importantly, Freezing Cold Takes shouted me out later in the year for that, because not my boss, but you can find me on Fantasy Football Today. CBS Sports, by the way, is one of the podcasts I'm on, and the host of that, Adam Azer, quote tweeted me when I made my 9-win prediction. Was like, this is the dumbest take Dan has ever had. And he's a Giants fan too, so I love that. But find me on Fantasy Football Today, or you can find Giants content and Giants talk on Big Blue Banter. That's the name of the podcast. It's me and Nick Filato. You can find that on YouTube under Big Blue Banter, on Spotify, Stitcher, all those good things under Big Blue Banter. We're on Instagram as well. Obviously, trying to expand there. So definitely give us a follow if you like to talk about the Giants and if you like the X's and O's.
No doubt. We've been having you on since we started in 2019, and we'll continue to do it. Dan, appreciate you as always. We will talk soon.
All right, thank you once again to Dan Schneier for coming on the show. Like I said at the top, we're going to try and have an interview on Friday to kind of give like an OTA kind of recap and a roundup for you a little bit. We'll hopefully have some things to talk about with this New York Football Giants team that's substantial. And with the start of OTAs, it means that we are one event, one day, one thing closer to actual real football. So we'll see you on Friday. And until then, let's go Big Blue.